Welcome to War Games on Toast, all of you lovely people. I am once again back talking about the latest edition of Warcry, and today I am talking about the brutal hunters themselves, the Untamed Beasts. But before we get into all that, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. It really helps me fight against that dastardly YouTube algorithmic demon and helps me get my content out to new, budding Warcry players. But without further ado, let's get on with the show.
And now for something completely different.
So who are the Untamed Beasts? Well, the Untamed Beasts are worshippers of chaos who are ferocious predators and hunters who are hell-bent on slaying and consuming the most brutal of prey. Utilizing and embodying powerful beasts, they leave nothing but crude butchery and slaughter in their wake. As is always the case, we are going to dive into the pros and the cons of the Untamed Beasts to give you a taster on what to expect when picking these guys up. Untamed Beasts is all about utilising powerful, specialised units and abilities to allow other members of the warband to excel. Between powerful pull effects and economy enhancers, the Untamed Beasts thrive when you play their game. Thankfully, they have multiple ways to play built into their box, giving you a variety in how you expand and what aspects of Untamed Beasts you really want to tap into. Broadly speaking, they enjoy massive combat threats synergizing with their pulls and a variety of beasts to bounce off of their beast speakers. Not only that, but for the most part, Untamed Beasts are pretty darn fast. Most of their units are moving between Movement 4 and Movement 5, making them faster than your average faction. They also have access to a Movement 8 Rock Tusk that gives them a very fast unit without having to look to allies or thralls. Finally, whilst their specialised units can run quite expensive, their chaff are very cheap at only 55 points. They aren't great in combat and they will die if left alone against anything remotely competent. However, they do allow the Untamed Beasts to push heavily into more powerful units and then fill the gaps with their fodder. And then we have some cons, and firstly, despite having some rather excellent units, Untamed Beasts also have some comparative duds. Prey Takers, whilst very good at killing low to mid tier units, are very expensive for their defensive profile. They are also noticeably slower and exert less pressure on the board. Not only that, your units in general cap at toughness 4 and your wounds tend to be on the lower end of the spectrum. Without support from thicker allies, the Untamed Beasts can feel very much like glass cannons. That being said, that cannon part can also be a little bit iffy. The Untamed Beasts can deal a lot of damage against your average units, and even tougher enemies can be brought down through sheer force of will. They will struggle to go toe-to-toe with the best of the best though. We're talking Ironjaws, Stormcast Eternals, and Ogres. These factions will revel in you playing their game, and then they will punish you for daring to step into that ring. And finally, as good as beasts are in the Untamed Beasts, they do come with downsides, so pushing too many Gribblies can bite you in the arse. The most obvious downside being they can't interact with treasure, which makes them rather awkward to use in a treasure-based mission, which are fairly common in Warcry. Now, with all the pros and the cons out of the way, let's take a bit of a deeper dive into the Untamed Beasts, and we will start by looking at their reactions and any abilities everyone in the faction has access to. We will start with their reaction, Brute Resilience. This reaction is probably the lowlight of the entire faction now that we think about it. This thing is a very minor increase in survivability that doesn't actually work against critical damage. Your guys are not tanky and they aren't meant to stick around and take hits. This isn't worthless, however. Your chaff can make use of this in a pinch if you need to keep them alive, and this is your only option. It has play, it just doesn't fit the Untamed Beast style, or it doesn't fit in my opinion anyway.
It's true, but he shouldn't say it.
Now, once you get past the reaction, the Untamed Beasts start to get really interesting. They have access to a double called Savage Fury that is really bloody awesome. This thing gives whoever uses it, which is for the record anyone in your faction, +1 movement on their next move action and +1 attack on their next attack action. This is amazing as it combines both Rush and Onslaught. Not only that, you of course still just have access to Rush and Onslaught, so you can choose to have the best of both worlds or focus entirely on one based on your situation.
Of course!
Their quad is up next and it's called Unleash the Beast. In short, it boosts the attack and strength of all attack actions made that turn by half the value of the ability dice used. This can be incredibly useful and, in the right situation, can be more powerful than even Rampage. We highly recommend you use this on your best units, namely the Heart Eater and the Rock Tusk Prowler, both of which become murder machines once this is up and running. The only real downside is that for the best outcome you need to already be in combat. You will more than likely use Rampage when you get a quad, since this gives you the means to get into combat, whilst Unleash the Beast purely enhances your prowess once you're already in there and scrapping with your opponent. That's enough rambling about universally available abilities though. Let's jump into units and we kickstart the proceedings with the wonderfully destructive and aptly named Heart Eater. This guy is an absolute chad. For 200 points you get one of the best bespoke leaders in the entire game. We are talking so good you could feasibly take 2 of these and probably be okay. A 5525 profile on the attack is ludicrously good and only gets better when buffed with Onslaught, Blessings or Auras. The Heart Eater is a blender through and through and he's okay on defense to boot. Toughness 4 and 20 wounds is fine. And movement 5 lets him get where he needs to be. He also has access to a fairly standard unique ability in All Out Attack that lets him get bonus move and attack actions when he lands a kill. You probably shouldn't gamble on this, so using something like Onslaught is usually better. If you are in a situation where you are almost guaranteed a kill, however, then this ability is a shoo-in for amazing value.
Anyone who opposes me will be destroyed.
I love this guy. The First Fang is just an all-around solid unit. For only 130 points, you get a decent defensive profile of toughness 4 and 15 wounds, but he shines on the offense with 2 great offensive profile, both rocking at strength 5 and deal 2-4 or 2-5 damage based on range. His harpoon has a 8-inch range with no minimum range, making him very good at just staying back and lobbing pretty darn devastating spears at things. It gets even better once you factor in his triple harpoon snag.
Get over here!
You set the First Fang up behind something like a Doom Bull, and then pull the enemy into said Doom Bull. Your Doom Bull can then activate next and attack without having to move. Throw in utility like moving enemies out of range of buffs or off of objectives, and the First Fang becomes stupidly useful. MVP for the whole warband. Not that the Beast Speaker doesn't give it a run for its money, of course. The Beast Speaker focuses on an entirely different aspect of combat, and that is using your beast to do more than they would otherwise. Defensively, they are identical to the First Fang, but they are noticeably worse in combat, even with a 3-inch whip attack. Where they really shine is in their Beast Master ability that gives nearby beasts a bonus attack action. This is massive and it only costs a double. Untamed Beasts already have a very effective beast in the form of the Rock Tusk Prowler, but every beast in Chaos benefits from this. If you have the dice, your Beastmaster probably won't be attacking at all. The most effective use of activations would be activate, use Beastmaster, then wait, then activate again, use Beastmaster, and then do whatever. This funnels your cheap Beast Speaker actions into a much more powerful ally. This is incredible value that should not be underestimated. It is very dice hungry, so you may have to aggressively build around the Beast Speaker to get the most out of it. Now, Prey Takers they're fine. They are 100 points and bring a decent attack profile mounted on a underwhelming bulk. Toughness 4 is fine, but 10 wounds is very much below average for a model of this cost. Because of this, I very rarely take Prey Takers because they die too quickly and they don't synergize with anything in Untamed Beasts. They have no abilities and they tend to fold far too quickly. Now, they come in a second variant, and this is the Sawtooth Blade variant, which is more of the same, only they have +1 attack in exchange for -1 strength and -1 crit. They are a side grade at best and don't fix any of the problems Prey Takers already have. I would leave these guys at home unless you are one-boxing the faction, in which case build them with axes and use the first fang to pull things into them. The moment you're looking to expand, however, you are very likely just to throw these guys on their arse. On the flip side, I absolutely love Planesrunners. These guys are 55 points and are pretty darn crap. 3313 is an average attack profile and toughness 3, 8 wounds is equally average for a points cost like this. These are your chaff, your unit fillers, your enemy cloggers, objective holders, and general busybodies. You take as many of these as you need to hit whatever model count you want to hit. Movement 5 makes them very handy at doing what you want them to do, just don't expect them to do much more than die and do annoying things. I can't get enough of them, and there's always enough room for more of these guys.
That was beautiful.
And the final unit in the bespoke box is the Rock Tusk Prowler, and I also love this guy. It's expensive at 195 points, but it's also very good value for what you get. 4425 is a nasty profile for your opponent to deal with, especially when supported by a Beast Speaker. Movement 8, toughness 4, and 20 wounds means it can get where you want it to be whenever you need it to be there, and it will likely survive against most things. Sure, it'll struggle against titans and dragons, so avoid them, but like low to mid tier infantry completely fold to this guy. To get the most value, you really need a Beast Speaker to get the Rock Tusk to attack over and over again. The issue is the Rock Tusk is almost twice as fast as the Beast Speaker, so it can be somewhat tricky to stay in range. With ranged units making a bit of a comeback in Warcry, the Rock Tusk is really good at just running interference. You can very easily get your Rock Tusk tied up in combat, and once they're there, ranged units are going to have a really bad time for the most part. You even have your own ability called Pounce, which lets you deal ability value damage if you end your movement within 1 inch of an enemy. This is almost always better than Onslaught, so use it for big burst damage on the approach. Chaos have access to one of the largest selections of allies in the entire game, if not the largest. I haven't actually checked to confirm. This gives you all kinds of fun toys to play with when it comes to expanding your warband. We're going to start with an interesting one, and this is the Master Molder. This guy is a replacement for the Beast Speaker. The Master Molder is not as good in combat, but has more wounds and a higher movement speed for only 10 points more, and you get access to the exact same ability as the Beast Speaker, in addition to a wonderful triple that increases the attack characteristic of all allies within 6 inches by 1. This is basically Onslaught on a very large aura. This ultimately makes the Master Molder more versatile, as he can run support for your entire warband whilst keeping your beasts swinging when needed. The extra movement also allows you to keep up with faster beasts. Super solid bloke, definitely worth considering. Moving on to Bloodkine. Bloodkine are amazing for their points. They are not too expensive, have loads of wounds, the ability to heal, and 2 very viable options when it comes to attacking. You can either go full blender with 5 attacks or go more punchy with 3 attacks and higher damage. Bloodkine are just all around great units that work wonders with the first fang specifically. They also move surprisingly fast with movement 5 and have access to the same ability as your Heart Eater, giving them ways to gain bonus actions from time to time. Super solid. If you want a Bloodkine on steroids, then look no further than the Humble Doombull. Far more expensive than a Bloodkine, but they come with 4 incredibly damaging attacks, more wounds, and retain everything else Bloodkine have in addition. So great movement, healing, and bonus actions. I tend to just save the 50 or so points and stick to a Bloodkine, but Doombulls are very nice if you have the points lying around. Now, I will be the first to admit that this one is a little bit weird and might not get used all too often, but it does have play with the first Fang in some ways. The Dragon Ogre Shaggoth is cheaper than a Doom Bull, but more expensive than a Bloodkine, and exists as this kind of in-between limbo unit. It has more movement, it has range 2 on its attacks, which is also very nice, but its real draw is in its triple, Bring Down the Storm.
Do you know what happens to a toad when it's struck by lightning? The same thing that happens to everything else.
On a 2+, you can deal ability value damage to any enemy within 20 inches. It's a very reliable nuke that can just chip away at tougher enemies from a distance. Maybe not the most efficient choice for Untamed Beasts, but it's a fun one regardless and worth considering from time to time. The Mighty Lord of Khorne is a pretty solid fighter. For 15 points more than a hard hitter, you get a slightly weaker offensive profile, but a far stronger defensive one. Mighty Lords of Khorne are really tanky, with toughness 5 and 32 wounds, so they aren't going anywhere. They can also increase the attacks of all units within 6 inches by 1 if he lands a kill, which is pretty darn nice. He ends up being one of the sturdier ways to buff up your warband's damage output. If you want something a bit cheaper than a Mighty Lord of Khorne, but not as strong or as tough, then the Dark Oath War Queen is for you. She is respectable in combat, but her real strength lies in Spurred by the Gods. This gives allies within 3 inches plus 1 attack without any further stipulations. This is weaker than the Master Molder's lead from the back, but it comes on a much more powerful model in terms of stats. Definitely something to consider. There are not a whole ton of beasts available to ally in with Untamed Beasts, and the ones you can don't tend to stand up to the Rock Tusk in our opinion. One that does, however, is the Chaos Spawn. This thing is a thrall, and this thing is 25 points cheaper than the Rock Tusk, has the exact same offensive profile, and plus 10 wounds. It does lose 3 inches of movement, but this is fine, since it brings the Chaos Spawn in line with the Beast Speaker. The Chaos Spawn is one of the most effective ways to get bulk into your warband, as 170 points for 30 toughness 4 wounds is kinda wild. It also has a pretty cool triple that increases its attack characteristic by your ability value, which can bring its attacks into the double digits, which is rather bonkers when you think about it. Combine that with bonus attack actions from the Beast Speaker and suddenly the Spawn becomes really nasty on the offense and defense. Being a thrall, they also have one of the best reactions in the game, in the form of the Master's Voice. If an enemy ends a move action within 3 inches of a hero, you can make a bonus move and bonus attack action with your Spawn, providing you move and attack the model that triggered the reaction. Super powerful ability that adds that extra layer of shenanigan to your warband. In White Dwarf 492, Games Workshop brought in an interesting collection of Blade-born allies that you could take an ally into your factions, and one that stood out to me was Ephelim's Pandemonium, which is a fairly cheap package that adds a lot of weird stuff to your list. Ephelim the Unknowable is the leader of the pack, and if you want to take any of his other models in this list, you need to take Ephelim to unlock them. This guy has decent enough stats for his price, with his defining stat being his range profile. This can hit pretty darn hard, and with a blessing thrown in for +1 strength, he can reliably chunk just about anything. His entire Blade-born warband comes with a rather funky teleport ability that allows them to swap model positions across vast distances, which opens up a lot of tricky plays on the cheap. His unique ability is a quad, and this lets him revive any dead models from his Blade-born warband. It's expensive, but gives a res to a faction that has no innate ability to bring back anything. Ephelim is pretty cool, but he does tend to end up being a tax for everything else you want to take, but those other things are kinda funky. Spawnmore rocks up with the Beast Rune Mark. Hey look, unexpected synergy, who is almost as powerful as a Rock Tusk, but he's 90 points cheaper. He is far more vulnerable to dying due to his lower defenses, but with 3424 on a range 2, he hits pretty darn hard, and he's still movement 5. What makes him special though is his ability Engulfing Bite. This adds 2 to his attack and strength characteristics of the next attack action, in addition to increasing its crit damage by 2. It only applies to his next attack action, but 5626 is an outstanding profile on a 105 point model who can teleport and be resurrected. Again, being a beast, you can use the beast speaker to get this guy to attack over and over again. Kinda spicy if you ask me. Now, Kindlefinger, on the other hand, is kind of hilarious. His stats are god awful, but he is only 55 points, or the price of a Planesrunner. Is he worth the price?
Well, no. And yes.
If you are buying into FLM, I would consider Kindlefinger as a obvious replacement for one Planesrunner. His only other draw outside of his cost is his range profile of 5111. When stationary, that's 10 shots, which is kinda silly. The idea here is to get some chip damage off, and with the Zinchian double Locus of Sorcery, you can increase the strength of Kindlefinger's range attack all the way to 4, making him far more reliable at dealing 3 to 4 damage than you or your opponent might expect. He won't blow your mind, but he's a funky little dude. Now, the final chap in Ephelim's warband that I think is worth taking is Apotrax. This guy has fine stats for his cost defensively. His offense is kind of bonkers though. 1436 is weirdly spikeable, and since he's also a beast, it means he can kind of get around that one attack, comboed with a +1 attack aura from a Dark Oath War Queen or a Master Molder, and Apotrax starts to pull some very serious value for his cost. Outside of raw stats, his ability Hypnotize gives you access to another pull. Now, is Apotrax worth the Ephelim tax? Not by himself. You probably aren't running First Fangs in an Ephelim super list since there's too much competition for dice, and this opens up a utility pick for Apotrax as he brings a pull on a double as opposed to a triple for half the cost of a First Fang. He's kinda interesting, kinda spicy. But overall, is any of this Ephelim stuff actually worth using? Maybe not, maybe kinda? The beasts in this warband are all interesting, and it would be remiss of me not to highlight weird new synergies that didn't exist until very recently. But let's get back on track and look through the usual suspects. If you want to bring really big dudes who hit really hard, then you want to take a Varangard or a Fomred Crusher. The Varangard is fast, tough, and hits hard with abilities that make him hit even harder, whereas the Crusher is slower but hits even harder whilst being even tougher. That guy's just a big dude and we love him for it. Are either of these picks interesting? No. They play into the First Fang very nicely though, and they are very effective at pumping up a warband. They are the dirge of flavour, however, especially if you take them together. So, you know, if you want something effective, these guys are very effective, but if you want something interesting, maybe look elsewhere. Now, onto some example lists. I might have went a little overboard this time. I had a lot of ideas for how to get started, and remember, I am not trying to deliver a ready-to-go competitive list here. The purpose of this video is to get you started, give you a jumping off point, and I had a lot of ways to get you started and a lot of ways to get you jumping into something kind of interesting, and I hope there's a list here for just about anyone. And we start with the Untamed Beasts of Chaos. This list is kinda small, but it hits like a brick to the dome and has a lot of sustain to it. The idea is to run your First Fang with your Bloodkine and just feckin' smash heads. It runs with a Heart Eater, 1 First Fang, 2 Planesrunners, and 2 Bloodkine with Great Axes. You have 35 points left for blessings and small tweaks. You could give the First Fang +1 strength, the Heart Eater +1 strength, and neither of those are bad investments. You could also drop 1 Bloodkine and take up Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. You could even change your Bloodkine into Bloodkine with paired axes and still have points left over to buff someone else. Smash heads, pull things, use your chat to do objective stuff and just get in the way. This list is super simple but kind of effective. The biggest drawback here is you only have about 7 models, and that's a little bit low, but there's a lot of power in those 7 models. Next up, we have the Double Heart Eater list. This list has a lot of wiggle room. You take 2 Heart Eaters, 2 First Fangs, and 5 Planesrunners. This list is all about getting insane value from your Heart Eaters. You want to tailor your blessings to either give your Heart Eaters +1 strength or +1 attack based on how tough your opponents are, and you want to use your massive horde of Planesrunners to out-activate, contest, and annoy your opponent before your First Fangs pull things into your Heart Eaters, who will very, very quickly eat just about anything they touch. You have 9 models, an endless flurry of attacks, and a decent ranged offering. Again, super simple and quite effective. Now, this list is more of a meme list that might actually work in more of a casual setting. You simply take a Heart Eater and then throw in the best models in the warband, and of course that is just taking 6 First Hunters.
Good. Bad. I'm the guy with the gun.
This gives you 6 decent range units that can also fight in close combat, that can pull on commands, and get your Heart Eater a ton of value. Not only that, they're kind of tough. Sure, you want to keep away from your opponent, but with a decent defensive line, you can take the odd punch. It's very silly, but in the right format, I am sure this one will be an absolute hoot.
Groovy.
Now, this list moves away from First Hunters and goes more into Beasts. You take 1 Heart Eater, 2 Beast Speakers, and 4 Planesrunners, and then add on 2 Spawn. This gives you 9 models and a lot of scope to mess with bonus actions across the board. If you wanted to tweak the list, you could drop one of the speakers and take 2 more runners, giving you 10 models. You could even take a War Queen by dropping a speaker and a single runner. Blessings are a thing here too. +1 strength or +1 toughness on the spawn is great, as toughness 5 and 30 wounds or 4, 5, 2, 4 on damage are just solid defensive and offensive stat lines. The goal here is to really leverage the raw value of the spawn to do crazy things. You could also run Master Molders here instead if you do a little bit of jiggling on the points. I would just stick to 1 Master Molder, but that dude fills the role of both a War Queen and a Beast Speaker, which is kinda crazy if you ask me. There's loads of play here and a lot of directions you could take this list into if you wanted to refine it. The only thing set in stone for this list, in my opinion, are those chunky Chaos Spawn. If you wanted to be a bit more speedy, then this is another beast list, and this one really pushes the Rock Tusk Prowler. This list is much faster than other lists here, as we are leveraging 2 Rock Tusks with 1 Heart Eater, 1 Beast Speaker, and 5 Planesrunners. You use your Rock Tusks to pick off chaff and really aim to secure a substantial activation advantage. The Beast Speaker can help you too, but you might find he is too slow to keep up. If you are concerned about that, then drop 1 Rock Tusk for a Chaos Spawn. This will give you some more points to mess around with for blessings. It also lets you drop the Beast Speaker for a Master Molder if you prefer. The Chaos Spawn variant will give you more bulk on the board and give your Beast Whipper something to support all game whilst maintaining a bit of speed. And the final list I want to put together here is a Pandemonium list. I put a bit of time talking about Ephelim, and I would be remiss not to include a list around Ephelim. And this list is pretty bonkers to the point where I don't even know how it would fare if I were to take this to the field. It is, however, kinda cool and takes the Untamed Beasts in a whole new direction. You take a Heart Eater, 1 Beast Speaker, 2 Runners, 1 Rock Tusk Prowler, Ephelim, Spawnmaw, Kindle Flame, and Apotrax the Stairfish. Right off the bat, you have 9 models, a fast-moving torpedo in the form of the Rock Tusk, a teleport, a revive, a pull, and you aren't competing for triples, meaning you can more easily activate things like Spawnmaw's buff. This list is much trickier to use and almost more of a control list than a straight-up 1-2 combat combo punch. You absolutely want to run your speaker with Spawnmaw to get the most value out of him. Outside of that, use your Rock Tusk to distract, harass, pick off, and generally be in the way. And you even have a few range units here who are pretty solid with or without dice, and you can even mess things around, maybe drop the Rock Tusk for, again, a Chaos Spawn, and then you've got some blessings, maybe to buff Ephelim's range attack, maybe to give the Stairfish +1 attack, maybe give Spawnmaw +1 attack. whatever you do, give this list a go because it feels kind of bonkers, and whether that's in a good way, I have no idea. It'll be a blast to mess around with though, of that I am sure. In conclusion, Untamed Beasts are awesome. They feel like one of the best bespoke warbands going. They have a lot of power in their base faction, and then they go to the next level with minimum support from allies. Their playstyle is very unique amongst the bespokes, and they are very effective on the battlefield. I mentioned last time that Iron Golems were a great starting faction for anyone getting into Warcry. That exact same sentiment is shared here. This is a really cool warband that deserves a spin. But that's the end of the video. If you made it this far, then you are an absolute legend. Please consider hitting the like button, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Let me know down below if you agree with what I've said on Untamed Beasts, if you have any tips you want to share with new players, and what you want me to cover next. But until next time, lads, ladies, and everybody in between and beyond, I will catch you in the next video. Ta-ra.